Okay guys, and welcome back to another Student Questions Answered. Now this one's from Ruan. My apologies if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. Now what Ruan has is a table, not a data range, a table that looks something like this, and what we want to achieve is having a different sheet with a drop down list and a chart that changes dynamically depending on the value that we've chosen from the drop down list. Now the drop down list is to contain these values here in column 1. So if we flip over to sheet 2, come to the drop down list, you can see currently we have A selected. If we select B, look what happens to the chart. There you go, it changes dynamically based on the selection here and pulling data from this table here. Okay, so let's have a look at how we do that. Okay, here's a new file. It's called 5 Dynamic Tables, and you can download this from this lecture. So this is the base data. Now what we're going to do is click somewhere in there, hit Control and T, and we're going to get this little pop-up that says, do you want to create a table? Click OK, and there you go, boom, we have a table. Now what we want to do is add a drop-down list in here on a different sheet. So all we're going to do here is we're going to select cell A1, and we're just going to call this my list and type enter. And then we're going to come over to formulas, to the name manager, and here we can see we have my list. And notice what happens when I click in here. I'm going to try and change that from A2 to A4, and when I try to change it, it automatically changes this to table square brackets at store. Now I'm going to overwrite that, and what I'm going to say is absolute A, oops, where am I? Let's just say A2, that'll be quicker. A2 F4 2, and where do we want to go to? We want to go to A4, and I'm going to absolute that by pressing F4. Then I'm going to click the little ticks, the little tick box. So now when I click on here, you can see that that table has been selected. Okay, close. Now I'm going to come back to here. I'm going to whiz over to data validation, and I'm going to choose list, and I'm going to say I'm going to say equals my list, and enter. And now we have this list here that says ABC, just like here. Now because this is a table, I can happily add a new value onto the bottom of this, and this will also capture that dynamically. So now we have A, B, C and D. Okay, so far so good. Now the next thing we need to do is go to sheet 2, and what we're going to do is add a lookup to the value that's in here. So I'm just going to say equals VLOOKUP, VLOOKUP, open brackets, point here, comma, come back over to here, and I may as well just select the whole table, say comma to comma false, because I want to also pull that description. So there you go, now I get pi, and if I choose number or letter B, I get cake, and you know how this works. Okay, so now we have our VLOOKUP. Okay, now we're going to flip back to sheet 1, and we're going to create a chart. Now because we have A selected here, I'm just going to select the data from A. I'm going to come to insert, and I'm going to come to recommended charts, and whoops, that's slightly off screen. I'm just going to pick this one here and click OK. So here we have A pi, and you can see that A pi is this cell and this cell, and the data is 1 2 3, and that's 1 2 3 here. So all I'm going to do is right click, excuse me, choose cut, come over to here, and I'm just going to paste it in there. You can choose the first one or the second one, makes no difference whatsoever. Okay, so now we have our chart in the second thing. Now what we're going to do is right click the chart, choose select data, and here what we're going to do is choose edit, and in this first series we're going to delete what's in there. I'm going to come here, I'm going to flip back to sheet 2, and I'm going to just drag over A and B and click OK. So that's the first step, and notice that this has now been deleted out of here, the chart data range. We'll come to that in just a second. So OK, now at the moment the data is not going to change, but here if we choose B, you'll notice that the title changes to B cake, which is what's in here, and C will change to C ice cream. Okay, so far so good. Now we need to deal with this bit, the data bit. And this is where it gets slightly more complicated. Now, it would be so much easier if we could just use indirect when we're using our data source. Then we could build a string that points to what we actually want to look at. Unfortunately, you cannot use the indirect function in a data series, but you can use the offset. So that's exactly what we're going to do now. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new named range, and this time we're going to select these 3 cells if we have A, these 3 cells if we have B, and these 3 cells if we have C. Okay, so all I'm going to do for a second is I'm just going to select A1 and I'm going to call it my data and hit enter. And now what I want to do is I want to come up to formulas, go to name manager, and this is where it gets a little more tricky. So what we're going to do is we're going to say sheet A1 absolutely. That is where we want to start. Okay, so that's our first thing. But what we want to do is we want to offset from A1, and we want to come down the appropriate number of rows and over to column C through column E. So what I'm going to say is offset, open brackets, this is where we're starting, sheet 1, and I'm just going to say for now, comma 2, comma 2, comma 1, comma 3, and close. And I'm just going to hit the little tick and we'll see what that does. So when I click in here, you can see that B, if I select B, it's moving down from here 1, 2, so that's our 2, and we're moving over 2 columns, 1, 2 here, and then we're selecting 1 column deep because we only want the first row of data, 1 row deep, I beg your pardon, and 3 cells across. So if I change that second 2, or if I change that first 2 here to 1 and hit enter and then click back in, you can see that we're actually getting the A data, which is this one here. Okay, so now what we need to do is find out dynamically which row does the letter selected over here in sheet 2 relate to. And what we're going to do is do a simple match for that. So all we will say is match, open brackets, I hope you're keeping up with this, match this value here, comma, in this data set here, and I'm just going to select the whole of column A, and I'm going to make that an absolute reference. I'm going to make that an absolute reference, and I want an exact match, so comma 0 and enter. So now you can see that A appears at line 2, which is absolutely correct, but we only want it to offset 1 to get A's data. So what we're going to do here is say -1. So now when we offset, we're going to offset by the correct number of rows. So let me just copy that, match, copy, and I'm going to come up to, let me just click off, come to the name manager, and on my data I'm going to replace the first number here, this number 1, with that formula. So I'm just going to paste it in there and click tick, and then we go in here. So let me just come off that for a second. So we have A selected, and when we come in here we can see that we have the A data set selected. So if I chose B in here and then came to name manager and selected my list, my data rather, and click on here, you can see that the B data is selected. So now our data set is dynamically selected based on the selection that we have in here. Now all that remains for us to do is point to that named range in the data series. So just right click on here. So now all we're going to do is click edit. We're going to come into here. The data range lives on sheet 1, so we're just going to delete everything else, and we're going to say my data and hit enter, and then click OK. So now when we select A, we have A pi because it's reading from here and here, and then we have 10, 6 and whatever that is, 4, and we have 10, 6 and 4. But now when we come back and choose B, it resizes dynamically, and when we select C, it now resizes dynamically. So now we could go into the bottom here and we could say actually we also want D, and it's chocolate, I'm just making this up now, and let's say 6 6 and I think they're total, so that one better say 6 too. And when I come back to sheet 2, I can come here and select D, and there you go. Now we get chocolate too. And that's how you do that. Hopefully that was helpful. An awful lot of steps, and you do have to use the offset, but that's the way to change dynamically a chart using a table. Okay, I'll see you in the next lecture.